The world of the Fire Rises is one of chaos and unknown. Nations all across the world entered into the year 2020 with hope. One such nation is that of the Russian Federation. Born after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it had seen an economic catastrophe that only ended with the rise of Vladimir Putin into the Kremlin in 1999. After 2 decades of political control, Putin retains his position as president of Russia. However, with the global security of the 2010s being ended due to the collapse of the United States of America into a second civil war, his position as president seems stronger than ever. Putin would not get to live to see the fallout due to him catching COVID, which would end his life. This leads to his close political friend Dmitry Medvedev taking control of the nation, which eventually leads to a war with NATO, a war that would decide the fate of the continent. With Medvedev's failure to capitulate Ukraine and the subsequent NATO intervention, it became clear that the war was hopeless. Russia was forced to sue for peace and accept its defeat after high casualties and the loss of a bulk of its fighting force. As a result, Russia gave up any gains it had got since independence and was forced to grant full sovereignty to multiple Caucasian nations. This defeat crippled the Russian war machine and led to calls for change across the country. The industrial base Russia had spent the last 2 decades building up crashed, as well as the economy. Politically, Medvedev was on extremely thin ice and was quickly removed from office following the defeat in the war. His entire cabinet followed resigning, except for Vyacheslav Volodin, who remained as he was the Duma speaker. Despite not being popular at all, nobody else was really in the position to take over the state of the country, except for one man who made his intentions very clear, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Following the loss to NATO and the subsequent government collapse, Prigozhin and his Wagner mercenaries declared that they would no longer follow orders from the government and began a march from St. Petersburg. What was left of the military high command contacts Volodin, who then resigns and gives power to Defense Secretary Sergei Shoigu. From here, the player is given 2 options. Either 1, they can attack the Wagner forces immediately, or 2, they can fortify the cities to prevent their capture. In this scenario, the player chooses option 2, and Prigozhin's coup falls apart. With the immediate threat to Russia's stability now dealt with, the government in charge begins to struggle with its legitimacy. The crisis was over and many Russians wanted to return to civilian government. At the same time, the military hoped to return to the old political system via Medvedev. However, his complete absence led to Russian citizens rallying around the only group that promised reform and economic stability, the Eurasianists, led by Alexander Dugin. Dugin's popularity grew quickly amongst the people, which led to Shoigu being forced to begin the process of returning civilian government. Shoigu appoints Dugin as premier and begins to rebuild the State Duma into something different. As this occurs, Shoigu works to crush anti-Russian protests and fund opposition against NATO forces. Eventually, Shoigu comes to the realization that he has the ability to retain some power if he decides to work with Dugin. Shoigu cancels the constitution and renames the Russian Federation to the Russian state, changing its flag from this to this. Shoigu's official justification for working so closely with the Eurasianists is due to him wanting to restore stability and functionality within the nation. However, I think that there could be another reason why he chose to do this. Shoigu saw as the old system kept distant regions, such as where he grew up in Tuva, extremely poor and underfunded. Dugin's promises for equality and a new Eurasian identity aligned closely with Shoigu's personal beliefs. With Dugin continuing to gain a majority of popular support, Shoigu's time in office was coming to an end. Shoigu met with Dugin in person, which the details of the meeting did remain classified. Shoigu then relinquished power and returned the civilian government over to Dugin. The Duma was then quickly disbanded and Dugin would go on to build his own Eurasian empire, which I could cover in another video. So I think the big question here is, why would Shoigu decide to do this when he did have legitimate power? So with the reasoning behind why Shoigu made this decision kind of clear because of the war, I think it's time that we address the underlying reasons why he decided to do this. One of the reasons was because he completely lost control of the situation as the public favored civilian government returning. He kind of agreed with Dugin as well because he wanted a unified Russia in a way that actually supported different ethnic groups. He wanted to prevent an inevitable popular uprising, which would have just led to his removal anyways. And this is also kind of part of 3, is that working with Dugin also allowed him to retain some power in the Kremlin. All of this made his position entirely untenable, which forced him to cede power to arguably the most dangerous regime in history in this timeline. I just want to thank everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Forgot something, just comment it. And as always, have a great one.